Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's lecture, and we're covering the nervous system and nervous tissue. So let's go ahead and begin. Now, what are the functions of nervous system? So your nervous system is actually the major body systems that system of controlling and communication. So you use nervous system to control function of other body system because of this you are able to maintain homeostasis, and you also communicate with external environment, plus your body systems and organs can communicate with each other using your neurons. Now, how exactly this communication happens? So your cells that are neurons, they communicate via electrical and chemical signals. Now, this electrical signal we call action potential, and chemical signals are called neurotransmitters. So you do have another system of control and communication, and that would be endocrine system. So you have nervous and endocrine system, both are controlling and communicating systems. However, they have their differences, right? So one difference is that your nervous system uses electrical signals for communications and neurotransmitters, right? When your endocrine system uses hormones. Another difference is that nervous system is rapid and specific. So that means response happens quickly, and the specific organ will respond, right? Like your muscle, and specifically like bicep brachii only, not all your muscles. And usually causes almost immediate response, but that's what rapid is. And it short-lived. So this response just lasts as long as needed for you to do some action. Compare with endocrine system, your response is long-lasting. Okay, so we call this the arch. When your nervous system uses sensory input, right, integration center, and motor output to produce these responses. This arch include, as I said, sensory input, so information gathered by sensory receptors about internal and external changes. So that means if it says changes, another name for changes in anatomy is stimulus. So when you have stimulus, this stimulus will activate your receptors, and those receptors gonna send this information about this change or stimulus towards your central nervous system. Then you have integration. So that will be interpretation of sensory input, and your brain or your spinal cord can do integration. And then motor output. Activation of effector organs produces a response. And your effector organs actually includes muscles and glands, right? So, so if you look at this diagram over here, you have some stimulus, right, through the sensory input. This blue part over here show you your sensory neuron. Then it's sent to your integration center. And so in this situation, this is your brain. You have interneuron shown in green, and then your brain sends command to your effector organs like your muscles through this what's shown in red color, motor neuron, and it will be your motor output, so your muscles can contract, so you can respond to this stimulus, right? Now the nervous system is divided into central and peripheral. Abbreviation for central is CNS, right here, and peripheral is PNS. Central nervous system, or CNS, includes brain and spinal cord, and PNS everything else. And it, the major organs will be your nerves and receptors through your body. You have two cells that make your nervous tissue. Neurons are principal cells, and glial cells that are supporting cells. Now, the cells that produce action potential, or this electrical impulse that allow your nervous system to carry on this function of control and communication, are neurons. So neurons, they what they do, they I'm sorry. So they use this electrical impulse or action potential to send signals towards your central nervous system and towards your effector organs. Also, we need to understand what gray matter is and the white matter. So if you look at this picture over here, this is your brain, and what on the surface of your brain is a cortex. So that's a cerebral cortex, and you can see this part, most superficial part, is darker in color, and deeper part right here is lighter in color, and that's what we call gray and white matter. Now, gray and white matter applied only to central nervous system. So in the peripheral nervous system, for example, in your nerves, you will not have gray and white matter. So now what is the gray matter? Those are mostly neuron cell bodies and unmyelinated fibers. So let me just take a regular pen so it doesn't disappear immediately. So if you can imagine, like motor neurons have different structures, but motor neurons, we usually represent it's like this, right? So we have a cell body or soma. So that's a cell, and this cell has nucleus, all other organelles, and then it has processes. Now, in motor neuron, we have this one long process that is axon, and multiple short processes or shorter processes that we call dendrites, right? And again, and you will have, of course, many neurons like this, right? So here's another one. So I have 4. And I'm not drawing this dendrites, but this area over here, right, where you have cell bodies and unmyelinated fibers like dendrites, this is your gray matter. Now, axons, they cover by a fatty substance called myelin sheath. And this fat actually has lighter appearance. That's why this collection of these myelinated axons, so it's right here, dense collection of myelinated fibers, and fibers are our axons, causes these processes appear white color, and that's what we call right here white matter, right? So let's see if I can clear all drawings. Right, so again, so gray matter is cell bodies, unmyelinated fibers. White matter are fibers or axons that are myelinated. Now, I told you that gray and white matter only defined in the central nervous system. So here's some more terminology for us: nucleus, ganglion, tract, and nerve. Now, so let me get my pen again. Now, this ganglion, so ganglion and nerve, those are in peripheral. Oh, yeah, I have it. Peripheral nervous system over here, right? And nucleus and tract in a central nervous system. That makes sense? Now, what does it exactly mean? So, for example, if I have, let me clear this drawing so that not on our way. So, for example, I have central nervous system over here and peripheral nervous system here. So principal cells in both systems are our neurons, right? So let me just kind of draw like this neurons. And the same in the peripheral nervous system. There we go. Right now, this collection of cell bodies in the peripheral nervous system, we call nucleus. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, my goodness. Ganglia. Clear. Okay, how to clear this? Okay, eraser. Let me erase this. Okay. Okay, so in the peripheral nervous system, collection of cell bodies, what do we call it? Ganglia. Right, in the central nervous system, the collection of cell bodies. So you see, it's, you know, it's similar stuff, right? But over here, what do we call it? We call it nucleus. So we call it nucleus, right? Now, let me see if I can get a different color. Now, where's my colors over here? Yeah, oh, here, right there. Now, this collection of axons in the central nervous system, right? Bundles of axons in the central nervous system, we call it tract. And bundles of axons in the peripheral nervous system, we call nerve. Okay, so here, hopefully, we have this, you know, understanding of terminology. So because our principal cells are neurons, and neurons have cell bodies, dendrites, right? And they're not myelinated, and axons, and most axons are myelinated, not all of them. But because axons are those very long processes, that's why we call them fibers, right? We kind of like on a histology slide, or even for a naked eye, right, we can see differences in color, and obviously they have differences, some differences in function, and we need terminology to identify those differences. So when we're looking at collection of cell bodies in the central nervous system, gonna be nucleus, and the peripheral gonna be ganglion, when these fibers of axons in central nervous system gonna be a tract, in the peripheral gonna be a nerve, right? Okay. So again, over here a little bit more about function. So we have sensation, we have response and integration. And nervous system by functions, so functional classification, is divided into somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system. And morphology of those systems are different as well, right? But somatic nervous system, it's a conscious perception and voluntary response. That means that somatic nervous system brings sensory information to your consciousness. And you know where your consciousness is located is in cerebral cortex. So this information from somatic nervous system reaches cortex of your cerebrum, and you understand this information. This is what conscious perception is. And somatic nervous system controls your skeletal muscles that you can voluntarily contract or relax. Now, autonomic nervous system is involuntary control. So, for example, sensory information comes from your baroreceptors. Those are receptors for your blood pressure, or your chemoreceptors. For example, concentration of oxygen or carbon dioxide in your blood. This autonomic nervous system brings this information not to your cortex, but to the deeper parts of your brain or spinal cord. And it doesn't reach your consciousness. You don't understand it. And autonomic nervous system then innervates smooth muscles and cardiac muscles that you have no ability to control voluntarily. So it will be involuntary control. They will be contract without your consciousness. And another, the third part that is not really defined in every single textbook, but in our textbook it is defined. It's called enteric nervous system, and what we call it your gut brain. So brain of your GI tract, of your digestive system. Right, so that's part of autonomic nervous system, really. Oops. Okay, so let's look at the principal cell of nervous system, a neuron. So I already mentioned a couple minutes ago that neurons might have a different structure. So on this diagram, we see motor neuron. Right, so the motor neuron, it has a cell body over here, or soma. You can see nucleus inside. Let me get my blue one back. I don't like this red one. Okay, so you have nucleus, right? You have all these different organelles like mitochondria, right? And then ER, endoplasmic reticulum, smooth and rough, and so on. Then you have these processes over here. They shorter and they branch a lot, and those are dendrites. Now then you have this long process, and human neurons, they have always only one axon. So that's an axon, and usually it does not branch. Only at the terminal, it branches into several terminal branches. Now what dendrite job is to bring information towards the cell body, and axons, they carry information away from cell body toward the synapse, and synapse is where one neuron connects, not physical connection, but connects to target cell, can be another neuron or muscle cell or gland cell. Right, so dendrite bring information towards cell body, axon carry information away from the cell body. So it says over here, dendrites receive signals, and then it doesn't say what axon does, but axons, as I told you, carry information away from cell body. Now we have axon hillock, right here. And even it's kind of like axon hillock, this is a part of cell body. And this is where axon emerge from cell body, and right, so, and this is where we generate action potential in a axon hillock. Right, and I already said we have these terminal branches, and this is secretory region because your axon gonna secrete neurotransmitters, chemicals right here. You can also see that axon in this particular diagram covered by what is called myelin sheath. All right, so myelin sheath is a fatty substance that cover axon, and what it does, it's increase the speed of action potential, right? So the electrical impulse can actually move faster if axon is myelinated. Now, what we have over here, this area right there and right there, this is called node of Ranvier. And node of Ranvier, so you can see that a myelin sheath doesn't cover completely axon. We do have gaps in between, and this is called node of Ranvier. So that will be important in physiology when you will learn how electrical impulse action potential is actually propagate through axon. Right, so see if we cover everything. Cell body or soma contains most organelle, contains processes, both dendrites and axon. So dendrites receive signals, and axon hillock where the axon emerges from cell body. Right, so let's see what is next. Yeah, we have more. So like, oh, we didn't cover some of it. So here's your node of Ranvier. It gaps between myelin, critical for signal transmission. Axon terminal, it's the end of axon, and this is where we have terminal branches, and then we have those bulbs. So here we would have a bulbs, that's synaptic end bulbs. In exoplasm, this, I didn't mention, but this is the cytoplasm that contains those organelles within axon. So exoplasm, exo is axon, and plasm is, this, structure, right? That's that contains cytosol and organelles, right? That's what cytoplasm is. So obviously, cytoplasm within axon is not exactly same as in a cell body. So because you have most organelles in cell body, exoplasm contains less limited number of organelles, right? Okay, let's see what next. Now, types of neurons. So we have unipolar, bipolar, multipolar neurons, and this classification based on structure. So let's look here. So you have, for example, a unipolar neuron, and that means that you have your cell body, right? And then you have only one process that emerged from cell body. And then this process branches into peripheral branch and central branch, right? So kind of like dendrite and axon, if you would like, right? But we call it peripheral process and central process. They don't really call it axon and dendrites over here, and no dendrite. But the point is, you have one branch from axon, just one, from cell body. Now those are, so this is unipolar, right? So unipolar, one process emerging from cell, found in invertebrates. Well, like it doesn't found in vertebrates. It does found in invertebrates and vertebrates, and those are sensory. In human, in us, our sensory neurons are unipolar neurons. However, they call it pseudo-unipolar neurons. I guess in invertebrate is it's a unipolar in vertebrates, and via vertebrates they call it pseudo-unipolar neuron. That's why it says here found in vertebrates. Now bipolar. Bipolar is a pretty rare structure, but you have a cell body, right? And you have two processes over here. So you have dendrites that carry information towards the cell body, and you have axon carry information away from cell body. And because it has two processes, we call it bipolar. And as I said, so here two processes, one from each end of cell body, and not very common, but found in your olfactory epithelium, and this is in your nasal cavity, allow you to smell stuff. In the retina, that part of your eye, allow you to see stuff. And a multipolar neurons shown right here, where you have cell body and you have one axon and multiple dendrites over here. And all neurons that are not unipolar, all neurons that are not unipolar or bipolar are multipolar. Yeah, that's very interesting. So those neurons are your interneuron and motor neurons. Interneurons are found completely within your spinal cord or brain. Those are interneuron, and motor neuron innervate your muscles. Right? Okay, so here's our unipolar, bipolar, and multipolar neuron. We do have some modification of all these shapes. So we have, for example, pyramidal neurons. So they show right here. So it looks like really like a pyramid over here, right? So like a pyramid, and then you have a process. So this is called in the cerebral cortex. Purkinje cell, look at this beauty, right? It's called in the cerebellar cortex. So you have your cerebrum, it's a major part of your brain, right? And cerebellum is inferior and posterior part, you don't know probably. Well, I hope many of you do know what cerebrum and cerebellum are, but we will learn about it. I just remember it's found in the cerebellar cortex. And over here, for example, you have olfactory receptors that are bipolar. So you see that's a cell body right here. And you have one process and another process. So that's a bipolar. So we can name them by shape, like pyramidal cells, by discoverer, Purkinje cells, or by location, like olfactory neurons, like over here. However, this is multipolar, this is multipolar, and this is bipolar. So now, so you can apply several characteristics. Do you want to classify them based on structure, function, or location, or you can combine several characteristics. Okay. Oops. Now, remember, nervous system is made of neurons and made of supporting cells or glial cells. So over here, you can see this would show in this yellow color. Those are neurons, and everything around pretty much our glial cells. So let's start with, okay, so let's see what, no, let's start with astrocyte. Now, astrocyte, it's a star shape. Astro means a star, cyte means cells. So it's star shaped, so right here. And it's make like a framework of nervous system. So it has lots of processes. And you see the processes attaches to neurons, to another supporting cells, to axons. So it's a support and protects and nourish neurons. And astrocytes also important in blood-brain barrier. And that means pathogens from blood cannot enter your brain because you have this blood-brain barrier, and astrocytes important in formation of this barrier. Oligodendrocytes shown over here, right? So this is oligodendrocyte. And what this cell does, it secretes this fatty substance that we call myelin. And myelin cover axons, and the function is insulate and increase speed of action potential, so electrical impulse can move quickly. Microglia, right there, where they are, these microglia cells. Let me see, just a second. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so so here I just I didn't see where the label is because my, some other stuff I have covering it. So microglial cells, this pretty I would say small cells, that's why they call them microglia, but very important job, phagocytic. So they're gonna eat up and destroy like debris or pathogens, right? Like your macrophages would do, right? Only they are smaller, but they also phagocytic. And ependymal cells shown right here, and they produce cerebrospinal fluid. Right, so okay, so we good over here: astrocytes, oligodendrocytes, microglia, ependymal cells. Now this stuff is right where I don't need it. Anyway, what we cover in the previous slide: astrocytes, oligodendrocytes, microglia, ependymal cells. All these 4 types of glial cells are found in the central nervous system. In the peripheral nervous system, you have 2 S's. So we have S and S. So you have satellite cells and Schwann cells. So satellite cells shown over here, they support neuron and they're similar to astrocytes. So satellite, similar to astrocytes. Schwann cells, they insulate axon, produce myelin, right? So here's the Schwann cell, and they're similar to oligodendrocytes. but those are found in peripheral nervous system. And it's important to remember because we do have some diseases, for example, that would affect oligodendrocytes, but they will not affect Schwann cells, like multiple sclerosis. And then only neurons of the central nervous system would be affected, and neurons in the peripheral system will not be affected. Now, what is this myelin that we already talked about? This is segmented protein lipid sheath. It protects and electrically insulates the axon, increases speed of nerve impulse transmission, right? So it's a protein lipid sheath covering axons for protection, insulation, and increase of nerve impulse transmission. Now, demyelination, when we have, some problems with the myelin sheath, so it's not complete or it get damaged, and then electrical signal is slower. And two diseases over here, multiple sclerosis and Guillain-Barré syndrome, and multiple sclerosis in the central nervous system, Guillain-Barré in peripheral nervous system. Now, we also talk about this action potential. I just want to see how many slides we have to cover. Yeah, still, several slides to go. So action potential propagation. So first of all, what is action potential? This is that electrical impulse that your neurons are using for communication and control, right? So like electricity in your wire, only electricity moving along those axons. So we can have two types of movement or conduction, because movement is called conduction. So we have continuous conduction and saltatory conduction. Now, continuous conduction are found in unmyelinated axons, and it's slow. Saltatory conduction is present in myelinated axons, and action potential appears to jump from one node of Ranvier. So here's our node of Ranvier to another. So you can see we generate impulse over here, right? And then we generate impulse over there. And it appears that electrical signal jump from one node to another node. Now, when myelin is damaged, so then the signal, we kind of losing signal. So over here, you see, you cannot lose any charge. But here you start losing charges. And that's why the signal decreases. And the speed of conduction decreases. And this is what happened, right? You see how myelin sheath is degenerated. So we do not have it over here. And this is what happened in multiple sclerosis and Guillain-Barré syndrome. And both are autoimmune diseases. So immune system attacks this myelin sheath. Okay, so here we can see the differences between saltatory and continuous conduction. So you can see that saltatory conduction is a propagation of action potential between the nodes of Ranvier in myelinated axons, when continuous conduction is a propagation of action potential along the entire length of the unmyelinated axons. So that between of nodes of Ranvier along the whole length, fast, slow, occurs in myelinated axons, that's saltatory, continuous in unmyelinated. But some axons just unmyelinated to begin with, and they don't need to be damaged. So just we do have axons, they are unmyelinated or lightly myelinated. However, efficiency, more efficient, less efficient for continuous. Now this we're gonna skip because you guys are not in physiology class, so you don't, I mean, some of you are in physiology class, but this is anatomy part of lecture, so we will cover it in physiology. Just let's look at energy expenditure, low and high. Okay, and we're gonna finish this part with homeostatic imbalances. So we already mentioned multiple sclerosis or MS. This is the degeneration of myelin sheath in the central nervous system. Guillain-Barré syndrome is in peripheral nervous system. Autoimmune diseases, immune system attacks and damaged myelin. This is actually true for both of them. So on the picture, you can see a normal neuron, multiple sclerotic neuron, and Guillain-Barré is pretty much similar stuff, only peripheral nervous system. So affects your nerves instead of tracts. MS affects young adults, symptoms, visual disturbances, weakness, loss of muscular control, speech disturbance, urinary incontinence. But you know what, because your nervous system regulates and controls all your body system, no wonder that multiple body systems are affected. That's why we have this huge range of symptoms, starting with, for example, visual disturbance and urinary incontinence. So myelin sheath in the central nervous system become non-functional or sclerotic. Shunting, a short circuiting of nerve impulses occurs. So either they slow or they shut down completely, right? So impulse conduction slows and eventually ceases. Right, and so here you can see MS really affects pretty much all organs of your body. Here's the Guillain-Barré syndrome, affects extremities, also respiratory system. So what we looked here, I'll show you. When we look at structure of neurons, multipolar, unipolar, right there, types of neuron, this was structural classification, but we do have also functional classification of neurons, so based on their function. Right, so let's see what we have. So we have three types as well. We have sensory. Another name for sensory would be afferent. We have motor or efferent, start with E. That's why I pronounce this efferent. However, I think in English it's still efferent. But just for me with my accent, afferent and efferent make bigger difference instead of afferent and efferent. So I apologize. And interneurons or association neurons. So sensory transmit impulses from sensory receptors, like your touch receptors or your vision, for example, right? Or your hearing. So that's your sensory sensory receptors located in, your either special organs or general organs, like either your skin or in your retina, for example. But they sensory or afferent neurons send this information from sensory receptors towards central nervous system. Motor neurons carry impulses from central nervous system to effectors, and it's over here. Your effectors are your muscles, and smooth muscles, cardiac muscles are also effectors, and glands. And interneuron shuttle signals through central nervous system pathway. Most are entirely within the central nervous system. So, so look at this diagram here. So you have a touch receptor, or no, they have an example of pain receptor in your finger, right? So you have a pain receptor. This receptor going to send signal, right, through the afferent pathway or sensory neuron. And you see this neuron is actually unipolar to your spinal cord. And spinal cord is a part of your central nervous system. Then is synapses with this purple neuron right here. That's an interneuron. And interneuron send impulse to this red neuron. And this one is your motor neuron or efferent neuron. And efferent neuron send signals to your muscles. Right? So that's a functional classification. Now, when one neuron meets another neuron, so it's shown over here, one neuron meets another neuron, or it can meet any cell over here. Well, not any cell, let's say your muscle cell over here, or it can be, instead of muscle cell, it can be your glial. But when neuron meets its target cell, let's say, over here we have another neuron, but it's obviously a dendrite over here, right? So when one neuron meets another neuron, it happens at the synapse. So, synapse is a junction that mediates information transfer from one neuron to another neuron or effector cells. And if we have two neurons, then we call them presynaptic neuron, because that's our synapse here, right? So that's going to be our presynaptic neuron. And this one is postsynaptic neuron. So presynaptic neuron conducts impulses towards the synapse, and postsynaptic neurons transmit impulses away from synapse. In the synapse, we have this synaptic gap over here, like that's a space in between. And in presynaptic neuron, we have vesicles, right? So those vesicles contains neurotransmitters, and those are chemicals that produced by neuron. Now, remember we mentioned that neurons communicate through electrical signal and through chemical signals or neurotransmitters. So this neurotransmitter is released into the synaptic cleft, and the neurotransmitter attaches to its receptor on postsynaptic neuron, and this is how we carry information from one neuron to another neuron or to its target cells. Because electrical impulse, like, let me see, that's electrical impulse, cannot go through the gap. So if you have gap, it's like you have cut within your wire. Electrical signal cannot move through this gap, but chemical signal can. So that's why electrical signal reaches this axon terminal. It stimulates those vesicles to fuse with the membrane, release neurotransmitters, attachment of neurotransmitters to its receptors, and then we generate new electrical signals in postsynaptic neuron. Right? Okay, so two types of synapses. So the ones that we just described is actually chemical synapse. That makes sense. Why we call it chemical? Because you release chemicals in the synaptic cleft, neurotransmitters. So you release chemicals. So here's the chemical synapse, specialized for the release of and reception of neurotransmitters. So we release chemicals. This is most common. And electrical synapse is not that common, but it allows your rapid communication. So less common, found in the heart, for example. And this is when you have connection between two neurons, and you don't need to release any chemical over here. So you have gap junction channels. So you have gap junction, you have channels, and electrical signal can go directly from one neuron to another neuron. That's why it's a rapid communication. And neurons are joined by gap junctions right here. So again, electrical synapse is less common, chemical synapse is more common. So here's our synaptic cleft that I already mentioned. So it's a fluid filled space separating the presynaptic and postsynaptic neurons. So that's the right here, that's your synaptic cleft. So it's prevent nerve impulses from directly passing from one neuron to the next neuron, and it involves release, diffusion, and binding of neurotransmitters. Oh yeah, just making sure I'm recording this because all of a sudden I didn't see my camera working. Right, so you can see we have a neuron, and we see that we have, those vesicles with neurotransmitters synthesized, move towards the synaptic cleft or axon terminal, and then towards the synaptic cleft. And we have release of neurotransmitter and receiving of neurotransmitters. So this black part over here, those are called receptors. Okay, and let me see. So we have different neurotransmitters. We have 50 or more that have been identified. most neurons make 2 or more neurotransmitters, and this is a chemical that is released from a nerve cells, which thereby transmits an impulse from a nerve cell to another nerve, muscle, organ, or other tissue. And we have excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitters. And here's the 3 most common: norepinephrine, dopamine, serotonin, that not only important in, well, we have acetylcholine, for example, right, that you will learn when you cover muscular system, very important acetylcholine neurotransmitter. But why I choose these 3? Because you heard about them, norepinephrine, dopamine, serotonin, because they affect your mood, affect anxiety, then motivation, obsession, and so on. So those chemicals are examples of neurotransmitters, right? So here we have some excitatory and inhibitory. So acetylcholine, excitatory when we talk about skeletal muscle, epinephrine, norepinephrine, histamine, glutamic acid, and inhibitory serotonin, endorphins, dopamine, GABA. So that's kind of like important neurotransmitter as well. So GABA, very well known. You probably heard about GABA. So acetylcholine, muscle movement, epinephrine, norepinephrine, wakefulness and arousal. Histamine promotes alertness, glutamic acid, memory and learning, serotonin, memory, emotion, sleep, temperature regulation, endorphins reduce pain, dopamine, motivation, wanting, pleasure associated with addiction and love, and GABA regulates neuron excitability and muscle tone. Right, so you can see we have many neurotransmitters. Some of them we heard about them in our everyday English, right? Of histamine, maybe you heard, or endorphins, dopamine, GABA. Right? I think some of them are well-known chemicals. So now we know that they are in a group of neurotransmitters. Okay. And that's it. Next video will be about physiology of neurons and nervous system. Okay, thank you for watching, and I hope it was helpful.